The Business of Esports podcast is brought to you by G Fuel, the official energy drink of esports and the original energy formula of gaming. Visit them online at gfuel.com.
Welcome to the Business of Esports podcast, where we explore the intersection of business and esports, the fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation. Please welcome your hosts, Arda Okal, William Collis, and Paul Dawalibi. The Business of Esports podcast begins now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Business of Esports podcast, from the keyboard to the boardroom. My name is Arda Okal. As always, I am with my esteemed co-hosts here on the podcast, Paul Dawalibi and William Collis. Thank you for rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. When you leave a 5-star rating and a favorable review, it helps others find the podcast if they are fans of business, of esports, or the intersection. That is what we dive into here. Lots to talk about here. We're going to do a big State of the Union regarding Battle Royale games because there's been a lot of small news items coming out in pretty much each of the major players. We'll get to that in a little bit. I want to give a shout out, though. I had a chance to go to Miami this weekend, gentlemen, to do Ultimate Gamer. It was a very interesting concept, pretty successful in terms of the individual tournaments, Fortnite, CSGO, and Smash. But a lot of people, which I found surprising, maybe I shouldn't because we're about 15 episodes in, but I had a couple people come up to me and say, hey, I'm a fan of the podcast. I enjoy listening to it. In fact, one of the organizers, Tommy, shout out to him and Steve and the rest of the team, he says he's listened to every second. And he loves Paul's hot takes, and he loves the way William breaks down his points. So a little bit of kudos to you guys to start the things off here.
My own brother Arda says the only reason he listens to this podcast is because of your voice. So
that's nice. Thanks.
So I don't know. A lot of credit to you here.
ASMR here on the podcast. I'm just kidding. But William, a little props there. It's nice to be loved.
It is. It feels good, guys. And I have to say, this is our 15th episode. I mean, I think we've really grown a lot in this experience, and I'm proud of the content we're putting out right now. But I'm proud to be on this podcast.
Yeah,
with you guys. I think we have great points.
We have a lot more content coming up. We got some plans here in 2019. So we are definitely going to bring you a lot of great content, maybe some live events. Who knows? Whatever happens. We're just definitely planning. This is a long-term play, definitely. But we got a lot to talk about here in the short term. First of all, let's start with a couple of news items that we missed last week. Paul insisted that we put this one into the podcast, and this is what we're doing here. Guess who is recruiting gamers for his own esports organization? I'll give you guys a couple seconds to think about that. If you guessed Meek Mill, you would be correct. That is right. Meek Mill is starting his own organization. Here is a tweet directly from Meek Mill himself. I'm starting my own esports team. I need the best of the best. Here's the incentive part. Okay, are you ready for this? And you get a DC chain at signing. I mean, if there was ever a signing bonus, Paul.
If only I was young enough to make Meek Mill's team here.
Why don't you like this, Paul?
Look, I don't want to sound like the cranky old guy. For the listeners' appreciation here, the reason we didn't do it last week was not a timing issue. I got completely trumped essentially by William and Arda, who said, we don't want you to sound like the cranky old guy complaining about hip-hop stars getting into esports. So let me preface this by saying it's not a cranky old guy issue. It's an issue of dumb money. And I'm not saying Meek Mill is dumb. I'm saying he understands nothing about esports other than he probably plays the games.
On what basis are you saying that, though?
Where's the history? What businesses has he built other than his own music business? So yeah, he understands entertainment potentially, but what justifies getting into esports for him? And again, another investment in teams. Like, to me, the dumbest of all investments are these team investments, especially when you have nothing else other than a name, right? You don't have some kind of technology or interesting angle or anything to bring to the table other than the fact that you're Meek Mill and you're giving free chains to the players on your team. So it will get attention, but I see this as flash in the pan. These guys are going to get in because it's hot, and 3 years from now, we will never hear about Meek Mill.
I just don't understand the decision to create the own team versus invest in another team, right? Like that to me is a little bit of the puzzle here. Because if we said Meek Mill was putting money into NRG or Cloud9 or, we wouldn't bat an eye. right? We'd be like, okay, good for Meek. He's getting involved. To me, it's the decision to go about creating your own organization, which presumes, more power and expertise in the space than just a name. Right?
William, isn't this a symptom of exactly what I have an issue with, which is they don't know what they don't know?
But they surround themselves with people that do know. I mean, LeBron James is getting into entertainment and creating documentaries. Safe to say LeBron himself doesn't know much about creating documentaries, but he's certainly surrounded himself with people that know the space inside and out. Don't you think that's what Meek is doing, especially if he's investing his own money?
Look, there's a lot we don't know here, right? We're making a lot of assumptions. I think the general trend is the issue of too much dumb money pouring into opportunities that are hard to understand or justify from a financial standpoint. You saw the whole controversy with Soulja Boy, right? Knocking off game consoles and trying to sell them for twice the price than what they were worth. Like, I just think there's a lot of these gut flash in the pan guys looking to make a quick buck in an industry they don't fully understand. Now, look, I would love to have Meek Mill on the podcast, and maybe he's got a big plan for esports that we all don't know about. But let's say I'm a little skeptical.
And,
Fair.
I've lived through this from personal experience because, I own a Hearthstone team that's, reasonably successful. And we had Paul George, essentially come into Endemic, which was at the time, we were starting Genji, a direct competitor, with sort of a similar starting position. And, I remember actually being really scared, when I saw Paul George wearing an Endemic jersey and flashing on some, media event for basketball. I was like, we have serious competition in the upstart, Hearthstone space. Flash forward to today, where Endemic released their commemorative 1-year jersey because the organization is struggling. And, they've essentially, kicking out some of their roster. It actually says The End on it, which I think is adorably sad, 2018 to 2018. And granted, it's driven by some Heroes of the Storm stuff as well, which is another thing. But, it just goes to show you a great name and a powerful brand, if brought into esports without other support, really, really struggles. And, I think there's some other things that Endemic did well and maybe didn't do so well. But at the end of the day, you can't just come into the space and think because I've been successful in other entertainment properties, I'll be successful here. That would be like, a basketball star going into movies and expecting that successful. Not every basketball star turns out to be Shaquille O'Neal,
right?
I welcome the dumb money. I welcome it.
Because you can profit off it.
Because I can profit
and
from
you know
it.
how to profit off of it.
That's it.
And I particularly welcome Meek Mills as an investor in Team Genji.
You would welcome, of course you would welcome Meek Mill into Team Genji. Right here, have a few $1 million, no problem. Of course.
Dude,
all right.
Dream Chaser Records.
Yeah. All right. So if you want to continue this conversation, by the way, on Twitter at Biz Esports, we have a lot to get to, which is why I'm moving along with these. And how about this, William? Let's start with you. G2 Esports raises $17.3 million in a Series A funding round. Now, the reason we didn't talk about this last week was only because we're seeing a lot of these kind of stories in the business of esports, and we are less trying to bring you a reporting on it and not giving opinion, and more so things that will stimulate conversation. But it is important because this is a rather large number. So this is from Forbes. The round was led by 3 firms: Everblue Management, the family office of hedge fund manager Eric Mindich, who is also part of the G2's board; Parkwood Corporation, the family office of Cleveland's Mandel family; and Seal Rock Partners, the private equity vehicle for Jonathan and Edward Cohen, who serve as executives for oil and gas companies like Atlas Energy. So this is non-endemic money coming in. Joining them are New York City real estate executives Al Tyler and Dan Gilbert, Brian Distelberger, co-founder of data management tool Yext, Mike Naif, founder of the scheduling app Doodle, and Topgolf president, media president, Yu Chang. So more money into esports. Any top line thoughts on this one, William?
I think it's great. I think it shows the significance of the space. It shows you how far we've come. That close to an 18 million. It shows how far we've come. That an $17 million investment in a pro team is news that doesn't even make the week it comes out as a headline. We have to do it as a filler story. But no, I mean, this is just part of the massive trend of real non-endemic money moving into esports because they see the top line results. I am struck by how mixed of a funding group it is. Like the Doodle co-founder in Topgolf, it doesn't look particularly strategic to me unless I'm missing something. It looks more like, an opportunistic play to get a bunch of capital into the team. But candidly, I think that's what esports needs right now. We need more funding and more teams to create more stability in the ecosystem.
Paul, would you classify some of this as dumb money?
Yeah, these investments make no sense to me. They make no sense to me. If you had a portfolio of 20 like this, maybe I could justify it. Maybe. Because the bet is G2 or some other team is going to be $1 billion brand at some point in the future. But one bet on one team at a valuation that I'm not sure what it was, but I'm sure incredibly frothy, way overvalued relative to the revenue it's generating. These investments just don't make any sense to me. Zero. I just don't get it. And it's a lot of these investors are going to lose their shirts on these investments. It's unfortunate, but it's going to happen.
Let me ask you this. One thing that we're hearing a lot about the esports industry in 2019 is the term billion-dollar industry. It seems like using that term, the billion-dollar industry, billion with a B, is the point of pride that we've talked about previously on the podcast. Esports getting on linear television, esports being a part of the Olympics, those milestones that people fabricate in their minds. It seems like billion-dollar industry is that new milestone, even though that is very impressive, of course. But it feels like that's what we're striving towards, or maybe that's what's bringing in more investments or people. What do you feel about that?
I mean, that's like a slogan. I don't even know where that number's from, what it represents, what's included in there. Is that just sponsorship dollars? Is that every dollar that the entire industry generates directly and indirectly? Like, to me, that's just a headline. It's meaningless. What matters here is, are we going to see an esports business, team or otherwise, sell for over $1 billion at any point in the near future?
What do you think?
No,
not at all.
Impossible. Not for another 2 or 3 years. Literally impossible before then. And so unless you're an investor making a very diversified set of bets, taking pretty large stakes in every one of these companies, and having a 10-year time horizon to get returns for your investors, these kinds of one-off bets are a recipe to lose money. And I'm not saying some won't work. Some will work. G2 might work and be worth $1 billion. I don't know that. The problem is, as an investor, you can't make one bet and hope it all works out.
Well, the interesting thing here, and I don't want to belabor this point, and the example I'm about to make, granted, was just shared with me recently. I think it's interesting, but I have done no historical vetting on this whatsoever. So if this is historically inaccurate, don't hold me accountable. But I think people are taking these bets and investing this way because they're looking at it like putting money into the NFL, right? They've decided that the big teams have already won, right? And so their speculation, their exposure to an individual team doesn't matter as much. It's the exposure to the space that they're taking, right? Because I think in their mind, if gaming works, G2 will work. If esports works, Cloud9 will work, right? But the counterexample somebody gave to me this recently was cricket in America in the early, like 1905, 1906. Because if you were going to bet on cricket versus baseball then, an educated person might have looked at cricket and said, well, geez, that's the sport of England. That's what's played internationally, right? And the Belmont Cricket Club looks like an incredible investment, to throw our money into, because cricket is going to succeed. It'll at a minimum be there alongside baseball. I mean, flash forward today, and obviously cricket is dead in America, despite being massively successful internationally. If you'd bought into the Belmont Cricket Club, you'd be done. So I think there is a problem of perspective happening here, which is people are assuming the big teams have gotten too big to fail because they're assuming sort of the space as a whole is what you need the exposure to. And I think that's very much not true, that even the games that are going to dominate the space aren't yet clear. And so, yeah, Paul, unless you're making a true portfolio play and buying the pure beta of esports, putting money in an individual team, unless they have a true sustained competitive advantage that they can prove to you, that makes you believe they are a singularly better investment, and it can't just be capital raised to date or winning history to date. I think it's a tough game. And this is being as somebody who's, managing an esports team right now and bullish on the future of teams as a whole, right? Like, it's a tough game. You have to believe you have something else there.
So again, you can continue this conversation at Biz Esports. Also, let us know if there are topics that we did not get to on a podcast and you would love to hear Paul and William discuss. Please let us know. We will definitely get to them. Speaking of buying, Forbes had an article. This is where we're going to start this week's topics. For an investor place, also, pardon me, I should say, they were reporting that an analyst is bullish on 3 particular stocks in the gaming space. 3 that you should absolutely be looking at right now, and here they are, and we're going to dive deep into them right now. These thoughts are from Goldman analyst Michael Ng. First one is Take-Two Interactive. Take-Two Interactive had great success this year with Red Dead Redemption 2, but Ng said that Grand Theft Auto 5 will likely be released or 6, I should say, will likely be released in fiscal 2022 or 2023 and drive at least $7 in earnings power for the T2 stock. But also, there will be several anticipated expansions that should continue to boost Take-Two's bottom line in 2019. So that was one of the big reasons to be bullish on Take-Two. The second one was Zynga. Zynga, as you might know, makes a lot of mobile games. For example, Words with Friends, Farmville, lots of puzzle games on mobile. Paul, your favorite device, of course. Zynga has 9 new games launching on in the calendar year over the next 2 years. In addition to bold beats updates, Zynga has major new product launches, piggybacking off of licensing deals like Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, and Star Wars. These are usually hit and miss, but definitely bullish in terms of these partnerships with Zynga and these types of brands. So look for that in 2019. The third one, which I think we will have a lot of discussion on, is Activision Blizzard. So investors keyed in on what they thought was a weak 2019 guidance in terms of Activision Blizzard. Activision announced it would be cutting its global workforce, as we saw, in an effort to manage costs. While Activision likely has another major catalyst in 2021 with Diablo 4, it can also benefit in the meantime from monetization of Call of Duty. Ng said the game's progression-based award system and DLC available exclusively via passes will help drive revenue per user. Without another major game release coming in 2019, Goldman has only a neutral rating for ATVI stock. However, after the recent sell-off, there is nearly 20% upside to Goldman's $50 target. So this is a very interesting thought, particularly what we've been saying, Paul, about Activision in recent weeks on this podcast.
Yeah, look, I don't have a ton of thoughts on some of these picks other than Take-Two, I think, is interesting because the CEO there, Strauss Zelnick, I think is a very smart guy. And if you're betting on management, he's probably the guy to be betting on. They have been successful with Red Dead 2 this year. I know he has discussed publicly that they are bullish on esports in general. How that manifests itself with their own game portfolio, I'm not sure. But I think he's thinking about things in the right way. And therefore, I think if you're betting just on management teams out of the 3, he's probably the guy to be betting on. Zynga is mobile, so I think that's trash. And I mean, mobile.
Even as an investment, though, I know that we're the business of esports.
Look, mobile gaming is not gaming, so I don't even know why we're talking about it.
No.
Wait, William, what are you saying?
I cannot echo that enough. Like, I was making a little note to myself while you were going through it here, and I was like, no matter what, make sure you're mean to Zynga, because I just look. I mean, it's fundamentally it's digital addiction. It's not gaming. It bothers me that we put it in the same category as gaming. It bothers me that Zynga is discussed in the same breath as Activision Blizzard. And candidly, I don't care that they've got a bunch of IP licenses because they don't make entertaining products.
The games have the same like gaming quality as a slot machine. So if we've got to start talking about slot machines on the business of esports.
So let's move on to Activision Blizzard then.
But before I get to Activision Blizzard, and I'll let William talk about Activision Blizzard because I think he knows a lot more about it than I do. But my big thesis here is similar to the team one and the discussion we just had, which is I don't think you can make any single bet and hope to win. There's just too much risk in the industry as a whole. It's all too immature still. And especially with the game developers we're talking about, these are hit-driven businesses. And who knows if Diablo works or doesn't work, or Diablo 4 works or doesn't work, or if GTA 6 works or doesn't work. Like, these are hit-driven businesses, and there's just so much risk there that I don't think it would be prudent for anyone to say, yes, bet all your money on this one because this is why we believe it's a strong pick.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, those who've listened to the podcast for all 14 prior episodes know I am so bullish on Activision Blizzard. I think the stock is criminally low right now. I think it is an incredibly well-managed company. I think it has, you want to talk about a vault of IP, Zynga. I mean, Activision Blizzard has, arguably the entire history of gaming, or most of the history of important gaming, pre, 2005. I think I think if there is a safe investment, and look, let's not give investment advice on a podcast, but personally, would I put money into Activision Blizzard? Absolutely. I was actually literally trying to open my stock portfolio in the background, being like, I think I should put more money in these guys.
William, why though?
William, I want to ask a question first. Sorry. I had a finance professor that I really loved when I was doing my MBA, and his view, right or wrong, was never bet against Goldman Sachs, right? They have 1,000 employees there looking at these things all day long, and for the most part, this is a zero-sum game. The last thing you want to be doing is betting against Goldman. So if Goldman's neutral on this, what do they know that we don't, or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a great point. And by the way, there's other reasons why we shouldn't be investing in other esports companies, including the fact that it's double exposure, right? We're already exposed professionally to one extent or another, in esports. So, you should be diversifying your risk to other. There's plenty of reasons. But look, fundamentally, first of all, I don't buy that argument, don't bet against Goldman. Goldman's full of plenty of smart people. They've made plenty of mistakes before. And candidly, particularly the esports market and how badly it's understood right now, that would be one of the few markets where I would believe where, knowledge from, insiders like us who live and breathe this space, we might have a credible chance of knowing more or making a more informed decision than 1,000 Goldman bankers, right? That's A. But B, what do I see differently there that I think, maybe Goldman is seeing, right? And I think it comes down to, look, I've learned in my, limited history in entertainment properties, the power of intellectual property, that strong IPs can go through periods of suffering. They can go through periods on the downswing, but overall, the quality of the story, the quality of the IP underlying it will out, and I think the history of the last 10 to 15 years of popular culture, almost to a fault, has been a resurgence to IP bedrock quality, exemplified by things like Lord of the Rings, right? I think Activision Blizzard owns a lot of the bedrock IP of esports, from StarCraft to World of Warcraft to even long lost properties like Blackthorn, which maybe I shouldn't put on the list, but they have a rich history in gaming that I think ranks above the best, if not the best. I think they have an infrastructure to deliver first-class services with things like Battle.net, which granted maybe isn't so unique today as it was 10 years ago, but it's still a wonderful place and an effective place to game. They have a huge amount of vision in the space. They are able to fund projects for the long term. Maybe Activision's changing that a little bit with their influence, but I still think if you want to pick a developer that will incubate games to be good and successful, I would put them at the top of the list. And fundamentally, I just think intuitively their stock is undervalued. Their stock is worth about, and I said this before on the podcast, their stock is worth about the same today as it was before the launch of Hearthstone and before the launch of the Overwatch League. And I think those two things were fundamentally good things for the company. Whether they've turned out to be, the Overwatch League turns out to be the absolute stellar success that people are hoping, maybe not. But I think there's been a lot of growth and improvements made in Blizzard over the last 3 years that are not priced into that stock price. So yes, I would look, guys, there's no such thing as a sure bet in esports. There's no such thing as a sure bet in investing. I am not qualified to give investment advice. Just ask my wife. But bluntly, I think these guys have to be undervalued. And I think even the guidance said that. They were guided to $50 and they're trading at $42 right now.
Maybe the neutral rating has a little bit to do with the fact that at least there's no announcement of a major title dropping in 2019.
Yeah, I was going to say the real stealth news here is this is the biggest stealth announcement of Diablo 4 ever, right? To my knowledge, there's only one quest designer position posted for an unannounced Diablo project on the Blizzard website. And we're like, well, it's Diablo 4 2021, but there will be new IP. And look, maybe the Overwatch League doesn't work out. Maybe the fact that the Destiny publisher, I'm blanking on their name right now, I can't believe that. It's Bungie. Yeah, Bungie. Left, turns out to be a brutal blow. Sure, yeah. But there's so much talent in that company and so many potential for future blockbusters. And, this will be a correction. These guys are too much of a staple in the esports landscape not to right themselves. Now, they do have to get out of their own way a little bit. Like, I'm desperately anticipated for the Activision Blizzard Battle Royale. They can't repeat the mistake that happened with MOBAs and wait for Dota and League to come into a space that they essentially invented with a Warcraft 3 mod, But I'm very bullish on them. And I think they have great management in place. I think, say what you want about Bobby Kotick. I think he knows how to run a company. How could you not think these guys are immensely more valuable than their current market cap suggests? Was that? Am I too aggressive? I
like the fact that, you at least you kept your opinion from week to week, right? You were very bullish a couple of podcasts ago, and you still are here. Do you think Overwatch will become a BR? Will there be a BR mode with that IP?
I would hope somebody's testing it right now. Yeah, I think you can't ignore what's happening. And look, this is like the business of esports should basically be rebranded. Like, our battle royales changing everything. The podcast.
We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Yeah. Paul, you shook your head there though. You don't think so?
I mean, maybe they'll take the IP and turn it into a completely separate. I don't see how the current engine powering Overwatch could do a battle royale.
No, I'm saying take the IP and create a battle royale out of it.
Maybe. But you could do a...
Or wait, what if we took all the Activision Blizzard IPs, put them in a MOBA, and launched that?
Or a fighting game.
You guys
like a Smash Brothers style, but with,
I do love
with
that.
Overwatch characters.
I wouldn't be surprised.
You guys completely missed my...
I wouldn't be surprised if Smash Ultimate had a Blizzard character in it. As a surprise. That's very much a side, deep cut. But hey, Joker from Persona 5.
Look, I just can't get past the whole Diablo mobile decision. I can't see past that. I really struggle with that.
But if that had been announced, I push back on that. If that had been announced differently, if Diablo Mobile had been announced, guys, Diablo 4 is coming. Rah, amazing. And by the way, we know that mobile games are particularly popular, particularly in our Asian markets. To support this project, we're announcing a companion app called Diablo Immortal. I think you would feel differently about it if it had been presented that way.
But it's not a question of presentation, though, right? It's a question of focus and resources.
I don't think you can fault Activision Blizzard for trying to take the Diablo IP into mobile. I definitely and I was just attacking Zynga a moment ago, but there are good games. You can have good games on mobile. There's nothing inherent about the mobile platform that prevents you from making good games. It's just most of the games that are made for mobile are slot machines because what resonates with that consumer. But there's nothing inherent. Look, the mobile phone is immensely more powerful than a Super Nintendo, and Super Nintendo had tons of great games. So I think there's certainly ways they could have a very successful, very compelling mobile offering, and even other esports like PUBG. It's done a wonderful job of producing a mobile title that my understanding is very popular.
So let's transition into that, actually, a little bit of a State of the Union address as it pertains to battle royales. Let's start with PUBG since you mentioned it there. They seem to be focusing more on mobile. Especially with their new esports offering. So it's going to be a $2 million prize pool. This is an interesting note from an article in Android Pit. PUBG Mobile remains a popular choice for gamers on mobile thanks to its wide availability in Asian markets and the fact that it avoids the bugs and cheaters that plague the PC version, whereas Fortnite's frequent game-changing updates might make balancing competitive play tricky. PUBG Mobile's stability and more grounded mechanics, as well as a lack of cross-play with PC and console, make it possibly a better suited title in the mobile esports arena. So let's just make this a more general conversation for all the titles. We have a lot of information that has come out for each title, but let's talk about PUBG first, simply because we've talked about Apex and Fortnite. We've shined a spotlight on them a lot on this podcast, and we haven't talked about PUBG as much. Paul, this to me seems like a good business decision. And realistically, going back to what I've said regarding mobile esports in the past, as long as the eyeballs and the money are there and the game is good enough to play competitively, it will thrive as an esport. So when you heard this news, what did you think?
Totally not surprised. Completely not surprised. I do think it is a good business decision and it is a good financial decision for PUBG. But I'm a PUBG fan. I was a PUBG fan. I'll say I was a PUBG fan. I was a huge PUBG player. I loved playing the game on PC. I was a big fan of what they did with that game. When PUBG Mobile came out, I in fact refused to play it. I refused to put it on my phone. And the reason was I knew what putting it on my phone would mean for the PUBG that I loved. It meant if I supported PUBG Corp by playing their mobile game, they would realize that the mobile thing was probably more lucrative for them, put more resources in mobile, and the PC game would die. And what has happened is almost exactly that. The PC game is effectively dead, and this is all that PUBG has left. PUBG Esports are dead in the water. PUBG, the PC game, is dead in the water, killed by Fortnite and Apex. And so PUBG is making a good business decision here because PUBG Mobile is literally all they have left. It is the last resort. It's the last gasp of air for PUBG Corp.
Now, I will say that you are very much a PC enthusiast. Some people might look at that and say, well, PUBG is smart to go to the next frontier and make more money than they ever could have on PC.
Ever could have. The what if is the part that I'm questioning here, right?
Okay.
If PUBG had every opportunity to be Fortnite or to be Apex and to make Fortnite dollars, they had every opportunity. They had everything at their disposal, money, resources, time, lead, you name it. They had everything available to them to dominate the category so that Fortnite could not even exist, right? Had they done things right. The problem is they split their focus. They started looking at mobile as a way to make a quick buck, as just about everyone who looks at mobile does, including Activision Blizzard. And by diverting resources to mobile, they sunk the golden goose that they had. They killed it. They killed it. And that's the what if that bothers me. What if they had not put a single dollar on PUBG Mobile? What if PUBG Corp had instead focused on PUBG, the PC game, PUBG Esports, and really tried to dominate the BR category there? What if?
Will, in your opinion, PUBG Mobile Esports rise to the same level as PUBG Esports as it exists today?
You asking me?
Yeah, go ahead, William.
No, you fundamentally can't have. I think, here I'm gonna add some nuance to my previous statement. There's nothing that prevents good games from being produced on mobile. There absolutely is something that prevents good esports from being released on mobile, and it's the nature of esports experiences are extraordinarily competitive, right? And require extremely precise inputs, and they're extremely intense, immersive experiences. A tiny phone screen is not suited to those things. There are exceptions. Hearthstone, is a great example of quote unquote a mobile esport, but even there, people play it on PC. If you're serious, it's on PC, right? No, I just think the medium of a phone prevents you from having a real esport. I think Paul is right. It's sad that those guys split their focus and lost an opportunity to be king. I don't judge them as harshly as Paul does, because I'm always a fan of, if you have the resources, do more. And, I can see a counterfactual world where we're criticizing PUBG because all they did was focus on their dominance in the PC title, and they let Fortnite creep in on mobile, Xbox, PS4, and, eat them alive from the edges in, right? Like, I can see counterfactuals that look like that. I do think, though, what we're jumping around here is a bedrock truth about mobile titles and, mobile gaming in general, which is they have to be truly successful and successful in a sustainable way, they have to be anchored around a premium experience on a traditional platform. I really do believe that. So PUBG Mobile, the success of that is always going to some extent the success of that in the wider esports space is going to be determined by the success of PUBG and esports.
Well, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, and I'd say, the classic example of this is the way Bethesda handled Fallout with Fallout Shelter, right? That is, to my mind, the best example of a mobile app supporting a marquee gaming franchise. And that is because Fallout Shelter exists entirely to support I think it was Fallout 4 was the experience it was supporting, but I get my numbers mixed up for that franchise. I think that's the model. I would like to see people do it for esports, where it's a companion app that unlocks new cosmetics for your main game, that maybe lets you earn some side points or some bonus points to start matches. I would like to see it as what it should be, which is a bridge experience when you can't play the main game. Publishers don't seem to be thinking about it that way right now. And as a result, I think as successful as PUBG Mobile has been today, I think it's also heading for the dustbin of history over time. It may go more slowly, but that's where we're going to head.
Well, one area that at least one prominent streamer thinks that PUBG has an advantage over others is watchability. So let's lead into Apex Legends. Some might say that the honeymoon phase is over with Apex Legends, but still very impressive. 50 million users in its first month. Places like The Verge are saying that it can become the next big esport. We still have yet to hear any official plans in terms of Apex Legends League or tournaments or whatnot, but certainly that will be coming in the near future. But if you were to ask people like Dr. Disrespect, he talked about this on his stream. He basically said it's not as fun to watch as a spectator genre, being Apex Legends, as other BR games, PUBG, Fortnite, etc. Fortnite has had another successful release of another season with Season 8. We got a hamster ball. Great. But all joking aside, the other thing that has come out of this, at least recently, is after Season 8, viewership has remained tops for Fortnite on Twitch after Apex Legends had dominated it for the last several weeks. So Fortnite is resuming that top spot yet again. But Apex, of course, has yet to release any sort of major changes or updates and any esports announcements. So I find this to be very interesting, and I believe that this will be a very much a tit-for-tat summer and spring for all of these BR titles as they announce certain things. Paul, you are shaking your head. I want to know why.
I think the game is already over. The game, who wins the BR esports crown, that game is already over. Everyone thinks it's hasn't been played or it's being played. I think it's already game over. I think Apex Legends has already won. And I'll tell you why. It's the tells from the developers, the publishers here, right? PUBG couldn't have messed up their esports anymore. Let's count them out. They're not even in the running, right? Fortnite has a lot of money to put on esports, but they've made every single possible misstep to sink their own esports initiatives. Whether it's you can't make custom games to practice for the upcoming World Cup, or they introduce changes days before tournaments, or whatever it is, they've made competitive esports virtually impossible, or at least very painful for anyone competing. Watchability is an opinion, right? So I prefer watching Apex. The doc might prefer watching Fortnite. I don't know. That, to me, that's a little bit more of an opinion. But what Apex has done is more what they have not done that tells me they are going to win this game. In fact, they've already won this game. They have not rushed to make major changes to the game. Not rushed any changes at all, in fact. They've made some small balance changes. Some people might call them drastic. They were not really that drastic. They didn't affect my own gameplay. I doubt they affected pro gameplay that major. They have not rushed to do battle passes. They have not rushed to do new characters. They have not rushed into anything. And that kind of mentality is why esports like CSGO, I think, have maintained such longevity. It's, let's not break something if it isn't broken, and let's not rush changes.
Whoa. Can I jump in here and just
do it.
And I'm gonna be aggressive, Paul.
Don't give me the og bit, because there's always balance issues with CSGO.
No.
But like,
I'm gonna call hypocrite alert here. I'm gonna throw back something you said in another podcast at you. You said, when we were talking about Fortnite, I remember you saying the thing I would do right now if I was Fortnite is launch Fortnite 2.
Yes.
Yes. Eat your own, be your own competitor, be your own predator. How does that square with the advice or the esteem you have for Apex Legends, which is, I'm so glad they're taking things slow?
Because here we're talking about what I'm talking about here is who's winning the BR esports game, right? Because Arda talked about Doc thinking Apex is not watchable as an esports. What we were talking about,
he said he prefers watching PUBG and thinks it looks better as a
what we
viewer.
were talking on a previous podcast is Fortnite has billions of dollars now. What should they do with it? And at that time, I never thought Fortnite was a legitimate esport to begin with. And my view was they should be iterating on their game to maintain their audience, to make sure the Apexes of the world don't show up and eat their lunch at the casual gamer level, never mind at the esport level. And I think from an esport perspective, too much change too quickly when the game isn't fundamentally broken hurts you. And I just see a more measured, more thoughtful approach that bodes well for its future as an esport. Now, we may be wrong on this. I may be wrong on this because it's a prediction based on a tell from a publisher we aren't talking to on a day-to-day basis. But my sense is their more measured approach so far is an indicator of longevity for them as an esport.
Can I ask you one thing? And this is just me, being, I don't have an opinion. I'm curious, but one thing I do like a lot about Apex Legends that fits with your measured, theory is the fact that there are no Titans. I was so disappointed in this at launch. And I think I said that at the time, but given the success that they've had, holding back the Titans to me, and for those who don't know, Apex Legends comes from the universe of Titanfall, which was a series of multiplayer shooters before this. Titans were giant mechs. And there was a run and gun person gameplay, and then there was a mech-based gameplay. And essentially, Apex Legends is just the run and gun person gameplay with a lot of updates to a Battle Royale formula. But we do not yet have the Titans, the giant mechs, even though we're in the Titanfall universe. To me, one of the coolest things they've done is they have a phenomenal break glass in case of emergencies button. If Apex ever starts to slide, if there's ever a challenge with player engagement and a need for something, they have the ultimate plot twist waiting in the wings. They can launch Titans into this game. I'm curious, though. So I view that as great measured content rollout, again, provided they had the success that they did. I'm surprised they managed it without the Titans. But again, whatever, more power to them. Do you agree with that, Paul? Or are you sort of saying, well, in your theory of the world, never bring Titans in because, look, we seem to have sort of produced a balanced, competitive FPS game right now, and something as game-changing as giant mech battle platforms will completely spoil that pudding.
I think it will spoil that pudding. And there's been some rumors that they had like other content that was developed, and they haven't actually released it. And that was a very purposeful thing that they didn't even anticipate the success the game would have. And so they want to do better now, and the original content they had planned as a follow-up now for them doesn't cut it anymore, and they have bigger plans in terms of additional content. I think going so far as a mech, as much as I think that would be awesome, right? I'm a big original Titanfall fan.
Amen, brother.
Would really ruin, again, would kill the golden goose that they've got here. If they're smart, they realize what they've got. They realize the positioning in the ecosystem. They realize the advantages they have over the Fortnites and the PUBGs of the world, and literally just double down on it and go, we're the competitive shooter. We're the one all the pros will want to play. We're going to support that community, and we're going to go big there. And if you're a serious competitive shooter guy and you're a serious BR guy, you come play Apex. If you're a little kid, you go play Fortnite.
I hear what you're saying. I think the true test in terms of who will choose what will be when there are competitions very close to each other or even on the same day. I want to see a major tournament from all three. This may not happen. Maybe they will stagger their releases, like not having multiple boxing pay-per-view events on the same day. Maybe they will stagger their events enough so that professionals could hop between titles. But if all the titles, if PUBG, if Fortnite, if Apex had major events with significant enough prize money on the line, I want to see where the pros go at that point and see which ones they choose.
I think that's a good question, Arda. Can I ask? I want to poll the group here, okay? 5 years from today. Let's imagine 5 years into the future. Actually, 4 years. Let's make it a 4-year number, okay? 4 years into the future. Which esport will be the most successful from an audience perspective 4 years from today? Will it be Fortnite? Will it be PUBG? Or will it be Apex?
William, take the start.
Yeah, I was going to throw a real nuclear bomb in there and say Spellbreak from Proletariat.
Oh my god.
No, I'm actually like Apex has really forced me to re-examine the stability of the space, and the more I look at Spellbreak, the more I like, which is a total aside. But I'm a huge. The more I've dug into that game, and I was so skeptical before, the more I think there's a credible chance that we're talking about Spellbreak as a competitor. Certainly, I don't think it's going to have the marketing budget these other games did, so it's going to take slower to dawn on the scene. It'll be more like the slow burn of a Dota. But the more I'm seeing there, the more I like. But look, honestly,
you don't think it'll go the way of Realm Royale? As an aside.
I there are so many. Well, why stop at Realm Royale? Let's remember all the failed esports.
But William, are you saying none of the three we just talked about will make it to the 4-year mark? Is that your view here?
No. I got caught up in a joke. I need to recenter here. So
which one, William?
If I had to pick a winner right now, I would say it's a split crown between Fortnite capturing what I would call the youth, pre-high school market, and Apex Legends capturing the narrower but potentially more lucrative pro market.
And we're talking not player base, we're talking esports audience.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really think, because I think that's the natural synergy. I think there's really two markets here. There's younger consumers who need something cartoony, a little bit safer, and maybe a little bit more personality driven. And then there's the older audience that wants something mature and more obviously skill based. And I think this goes back to my comments earlier about dating websites in like episode 3, where I was like, you can have Match.com and eHarmony live together and actually make each other's business model better, because different types of people want different types of dating. Same deal here. I think those two will split the crown, and as a result, that will lock their dominance on the market and nobody else will be able to come in.
I agree. I think Fortnite has a lot of money invested in esports, especially in 2019 with that 9-figure prize pool. I think that's very important. I think that the prize pool amount has a direct correlation to the audience size. I do. I believe that the larger the tournament and the larger importance placed and perceived upon that tournament, eyeballs will come. And I think that $100 million or $1 million, $2 million prize pool for a game that, even if you believe is just watchable enough, or maybe you don't play but you know about, you will watch.
So your bet would be on Fortnite 4 years from today.
If the prize pools remain the same and if the interest remains the same, yes, I believe that Fortnite. But I will also say that I think that it will not be Fortnite's primary interest. I think I could see Apex making esports a primary interest. Like I said, I think Fortnite is going to make tournaments part of their programming. I think that they are more like Netflix and less like Overwatch League. I think that they will add it to their programming in between a Marshmello concert and a Kevin Hart stand-up set on back-to-back weeks. But I do believe that the interest will be there, even if only for the casual audience. What about you, Paul?
I mean, my bet is on Apex. No, there's no question. There's no question. From an esports audience 4 years from today, and I think the prizing has an effect, but doesn't change the fundamentals. Like CS:GO doesn't have the biggest prizes, even for the majors, doesn't have the biggest prizes, but still generates a really great audience.
It's beautiful to watch.
But Paul, the Fortnite numbers didn't dip in February. I'm not seeing the downtrend from this big competitor entering the market. For your theory to hold, I would expect there to be some sort of mirror reaction if they're truly competitive, A. And B, just to push a little bit more, Marshmello. Like, we had this whole conversation of how Fortnite can be a little bit more of a platform.
Yeah, but we're talking esports audience. In other words, people watching a competition, a Fortnite competition where competitors are playing for money.
If you count,
right, we're not talking about streamers.
Okay, so there's another thing. If you count, for example, let's have a fun competition with 50 squads of 2, and it's a celebrity and a quote-unquote professional gamer. Maybe they're not at the top 0.001% of the competitive competition who are maybe moving on to Apex at this point or will have in 4 years, but we're still seeing these sort of celebrity activations that are successful and are getting hundreds of thousands of people online watching. I think that could be symbiotic. I think that is probably where Fortnite would go more so than a elite competitive competition that we would classify as a top esport. But there would still be successful competition, just maybe not with the very, very tippy-top players that are competing in Apex for prize money.
Do any of the three make it to CS:GO levels of longevity?
Yeah, Fortnite.
Yeah.
Fortnite's already on
from
its
a competitive esport perspective, not from a
okay.
casual game. I watch streamers.
How can we
playing
answer
it.
that question if Apex hasn't even had an official event yet?
I get it. I'm curious what you guys think.
That's a great question.
I don't know how we can even determine this. Let me ask you this. I mean, the answer is maybe we can leave that for now and maybe call it a maybe. But there are a couple of BRs that we're not talking about for different reasons too. One of them because maybe some people, especially stateside, aren't aware of it. But another one is, as you've said on a previous podcast, Paul, is just completely fell by the wayside and not discussed at all. Let's start with that one. Blackout. We've referenced it very briefly on this podcast.
Look, all you need to know here, I think it was Team Liquid this week that announced that their entire Blackout team is essentially moving to Apex. So
that's the only thing you need to know. I mean, basically,
like you get one of the biggest teams in the world basically saying, we don't care about this game. The same guys playing this game are going to play this other game instead.
So here's an interesting thought. Let me ask this question, and then we can move on from this particular title. We did see it as part of the reasons to invest in Activision Blizzard, right? And we just talked about that earlier on. So Blackout, even though we're not necessarily talking about it in the esports realm, it is still one of the reasons that Goldman Sachs said, yes, you should consider investing in Activision Blizzard for this reason. So why has it not translated? Is it wrong place, wrong time? Is it the mechanics aren't good? Why hasn't it translated so far?
Well, I think Call of Duty has a promising future as an esport. I just don't think it's Blackout specifically.
Why not Blackout?
Like, meaning their normal multiplayer, I think, has always had a very compelling competitive scene.
But Blackout in particular is what I'm asking.
Why not Blackout? Blackout's an interesting one because, like in all businesses, having a good product is not enough. Having enough resources to bring that product to market in an effective way is not enough. Your timing needs to be good as well. And Blackout's timing came at peak Fortnite euphoria, and Apex came at a time when Fortnite was at sort of peak oversaturation. And I don't think you can underestimate the value of good timing in the success of a business or a product like this.
William?
Yeah, I mean, I might venture into space, I don't know, but I think there are plenty of counterexamples in 2018 of potentially well-financed battle royales like Ring of Elysium, right, that launched into bad timing and died, right? And
didn't bring enough to the table.
And didn't bring enough to the table. That's fair. That's very fair. I think at some point there's some amazing, post-factual study to be done decomposing the different variables of success for battle royale shooters and assigning various weights to each one. But I do think right now, simply put, you have to be a great game. You have to have a killer marketing plan because the space is super crowded, and you have to get lucky. And that's a real scenario for lightning in a bottle. And Apex Legends, look, for everything they did well, they got crazy lucky. They did. You can't, yes, they created their own luck to some extent, but I guarantee you could have replicated those same exact launch conditions on a different day and had the game struggle to hit 1 million users.
But it's
right?
for this reason, and William, I think you're missing the timing piece here, which is, I think, probably the most critical, right? And for this reason, I worry about games like Spellbreak, because Spellbreak's coming out at peak Apex euphoria, right? And therefore, will it get the attention it deserves or should have? Who knows? But if I was developing a BR game, I would wait a year when people are getting a little bit tired of Apex, or a year and a half when people have played 1,000 hours or 2,000 hours of Apex and they're going, man, I wish I had something else to play here.
Do you think Spellbreak is different enough from what's out there right now, though, for it to gain traction?
Realm Royale was different enough, but again, bad timing.
But Realm Royale was saddled with paladins. I think the one thing that's also true in all of this is you get one bite at the apple. You don't. The days of being able to do what Fortnite did, launch your game and then be like, oops, I meant to launch this. That's done. You know what I mean? And I think, as much as we criticize Blackout, I think part of the reason why Blackout didn't work is because it was buried in Call of Duty, right? And that was in the traditional Call of Duty retail purchase model, which does not work for the large user bases you need to sustain a BR title. So, I think, as we kind of zoom back here on, Spellbreak and all of these games, I think the launch timing, everything here, you have to have lightning in a bottle. It's so difficult to get it right. But at the end of the day, the market has matured significantly beforehand. Sorry, I've got to restate my point. The market has matured a lot. There's more competitors here than there were 2 years ago. And to be able to have all the perfect conditions of luck, and by the way, have the budget and money that makes you competitive against one of these major titles today, it's not going to happen again. I like the idea of niche titles like Spellbreak coming in. I think if anybody can do it, it's them, because they have a fresh take on the genre with swords and sorcery that maybe gets you far enough. And again, I really can't underestimate how much I think Paladins killed, Realm Royale, right? Like, it's just bluntly, like, that was the problem with that game. Is, right. And I even like Paladins, but it was prejudged,
And we also have titles that we haven't even spoken about. For example, there is a Fortnite of Singapore that we haven't even talked about here. It's called Free Fire, in case you haven't heard about it. It's very popular in Asia. It has about 40 million people logging on each day to play. It's exactly what you would expect. It's the Fortnite of Singapore, as we just talked about. And in fact, it's so popular that Forrest Lee, the founder of the company C, that is the parent company of Garena International that created Free Fire, has become a billionaire as a result of the success of this game. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because what I'm wondering is, and we're seeing a lot of other Battle Royale titles, right? The one true winner that we haven't spoken about is Tetris 99. Shout out to Tetris. The correct answer is Tetris 99. We're all talking about what's going to play.
Guys, if you don't know, Arda will be streaming Tetris 99 every moment he's
I'll be
alive.
casting every major tournament for the foreseeable future. But what I want to get to is, okay, let's forecast the Battle Royale genre, because we are seeing a lot more diverse titles coming out. Whether it's Spellbreak, whether it's more shoot FPS titles, whether it's even things like Tetris. Like, we're seeing a lot more come in, Battle Royale. And a lot of people perceive it to be the hot ticket item today. But how long will this last? And will it affect esports moving forward? Will when this genre falls off the cliff, as it inevitably does with every type of genre, what will happen to its esports landscape?
I mean, look, if you want me to make, I think what you're really asking there, Arda, is make a super bold prediction about the future of Battle Royale. That's really interesting.
And give me a timeline if you can.
So let me make the bomb.com prediction here. Prepare to have your mind blown. Sync the beginning of the podcast with the end. Here's what I think would really reposition Battle Royale. Diablo 4 launches, and it's a Battle Royale game. Because there's nothing inherent that says your Battle Royales have to be FPSs. The magic of Battle Royale is you get a whole bunch of people together. It's a little bit chaotic, a little bit team-oriented. There's this sort of crazy chemistry of chaos in the genre. Why wouldn't that work in a competitive RPG experience like Diablo? You could design it. You could take it that way. It would elevate the genre to a new level. It would be an open area. It would bring in new elements for gamers like me who value their progression systems more than their cosmetic systems. And it would feel like a fresh take on a franchise that needs a fresh take after D3 and Immortal, right? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if you want a bold take, I think for a competitor to come into the space and knock down Apex or knock down Fortnite, it has to be something like that. It has to be an expansion of the genre itself. Just like PUBG was an expansion of the traditional FPS.
Paul?
To me, Battle Royale is not new. It's not new. Battle Royale is a rebranding of something very old in gaming, especially in PC gaming. It's a rebranding of what we used to call massively multiplayer. That's essentially all it is. It's I get to play with a lot of other people, and I get Battle Royale means there's one winner, but to me, the future of Battle Royale is it continues to evolve to a point where it goes back to what the original thesis was, which is, how can I create an experience that seems really massive in scale? And so, to me, the future of Battle Royale is 10,000 people, not 100. 100,000 people, right? In huge maps, persistent universes, wars and battles that exist where you can play and be a part of something that goes on for years. Like, to me, that's the eventual evolution of Battle Royale. And
well, I thought you were going to be more direct and say planet side.
Like, I was a huge huge planet side fan. And the technology just wasn't available to do it justice, I think, at the time. But as we get there, and I think as this genre attracts more and more attention, we will get to that place where Battle Royale goes beyond 100 people on an island and one winner. It really goes back to a massively multiplayer experience.
You can see an unlimited amount of people battling where there's one winner or multiple winners. There's going to be some modification.
Or winners over time, right? Where the universe is persistent.
Okay. Interesting. William,
Yeah,
final thought on this?
Yeah, I mean, like I had this conversation with somebody recently, not saying who, maybe my wife, where, she made a point that I thought was interesting, which is, is maybe esports, just based on what's happening in the space and the sort of games that seem to be successful and the sort of stabilization you seem to need in the industry, is esports not just the longest, most circuitous route to World of Warcraft 2? And by that I mean, like, did we not trick ourselves with competitive gaming and teams and all of this stuff when really it's not teams, it's guilds, right? It's not, isolated competitive experience. It's sustained long-term competitive experiences because those are more rewarding. And it's not instance games like 5-on-5. It's, full server on server. In which case, didn't we just kind of walk ourselves all the way back to the MMO genre? And there's, there's some truth to that.
Isn't that what I said though, William? Like, are you agreeing with my massively multiplayer kind of?
I guess I am, Paul. I guess I'm agreeing it with you in a stupider way. I don't know. I think the way I said it sounded cooler, but
it did.
I think to some extent. Now, I do think there is something fundamental that's changed, which is we've recognized it's not just a desire to socialize; it's a desire to compete. Right? That is a very powerful human motivating factor that fundamentally it was present in World of Warcraft. But for people who play World of Warcraft, the competition at the end of the day, particularly for the early days of that game when it was at its peak, was social. Right? You wanted to have the best gear so you could show it off to your friends. You wanted that 300 enchant Wind Fury, right? So your buddies knew just how good but it was a social currency. And battle royales and esports have moved into a competitive currency. There will be a merger of the two. But yeah, I for one do think to some extent we are just coming a long way to rediscover MMOs. I think they will look very different than World of Warcraft in this new world. They'll look more like Fortnite, which is why I think the Marshmallow concert, again, is so game-changing because that speaks to a social platform and not just a gaming platform. But yeah, we might be taking a long route back. And certainly when I look at the types of games that are successful and have long-term staying power, like League of Legends, oddly enough, if you really break League of Legends down, and you say to yourself for a second, forget that it's instance one-on-one matches, but you say the game of League of Legends is climbing to platinum, to diamond, to mat. That's the game, not the individual match. It's that progression system. League starts to look a lot more like World of Warcraft than you might realize. And the ways in which you are engaging with League of Legends in terms of, play groups and scheduled meetup times and, pre-strategy, it starts to look a lot like World of Warcraft raiding. And I think
final thought here, William.
Yeah. I think there's going to be some changes here. I think you're going to see the competitive side emerge as the dominant side because I think that's the stronger human drive. And certainly that's the more monetizable human drive, at least today. But yeah, I think we could be heading to a world where World of Warcraft comes back in a big way.
Well, we ran out of time here. We didn't even get to the last story here. Panda TV reportedly filing for bankruptcy and shutting down on March 18th.
Like
However, no, William, we're not going to get to it here. Sorry, we're not getting it to here. We got to go. But if you do want to get thoughts, you can find us on Twitter at Biz Esports. If you want us to talk about those and other topics that we didn't get to, you can let us know on Twitter so that we can get to it next week. But that is it for us. For Paul Dawalibi and William Calls, thank you very much for joining us. My name is Ardo Cal, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Business of Esports podcast. Check us out at thebusinessofesports.com and on Twitter at BizEsports.